Hello, everyone, and either welcome or welcome back to the Gender Libertarian podcast. If you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and on my Patreon page, where you do get early access to episodes and exclusive content. I will put the link down in the show notes. So I wanted to do this episode today as kind of separate from the weekly roundup because there's been two stories that in and of themselves are pretty bombshell stories, but it's also two stories where libertarians in particular, and pretty much anybody who thinks about these sorts of things, it's not surprising to find out these things. So it's not a bombshell in that particular sense. It's a bombshell in that for both of these stories, this is confirmation of something that we have long thought and believed to be true. And now there's proof, basically, that the libertarians were right the whole time and everybody should have listened to us on both of these issues. So, yeah, that could actually be like the subtitle to this episode, is that the libertarians were right and you should have listened a long time ago. So, let's start with the first story, and that is that the Washington Post has gotten a hold of what we are all calling the Afghanistan Papers, as basically like a nod to the Pentagon Papers, which when they were released showed that the U.S. did systematically lie to the American people about Vietnam, about what was going on there, about our alleged successes in Vietnam, which obviously we were not successful in Vietnam. And it also sets up the obvious parallels between Vietnam and Afghanistan now, especially in light of the contents of what was found in these papers. And how this whole thing came to be is that the government commissioned this report on the failures of the war in Afghanistan. So overall, this is 2,000 pages long. Like the Afghanistan Papers is 2,000 pages long. And I'll put down in the show notes the link to the Washington Post story, which within that, there is a link to all 2,000 pages. Like, you can sit down and read it if you wish. But basically, it's a compilation of interview notes, transcripts, excerpts from all sorts of different people. There's over 400 people interviewed, everybody from generals to White House officials to diplomats to aid workers to officials in other countries, like just basically an incredibly exhaustive set of interviews to try to pinpoint where it all went wrong in Afghanistan. So, and another part of this, which is actually interesting within the Afghanistan Papers, is they actually got Rumsfeld's classified memos from 2001 to 2006, which they were euphemistically called snowflakes, which is funny when you think about it now. But basically, Rumsfeld was known for releasing these sorts of very short little classified memos pertaining to Afghanistan, asking questions, making requests, stuff like that. So we actually got those memos in the Afghanistan Papers too. And the picture it paints is incredibly damning. Incredibly damning. And ultimately, the upshot is that for a very long time, the U.S. has had no fucking clue what we are doing in Afghanistan. There has been no coherent strategy. There's no one mission. There's no kind of anything in the way of defining what victory would look like in Afghanistan. It's just been a clusterfuck. And it's been that way for well over a decade. And there's just interview on interview on interview of these people just basically saying that, like, we have no idea what we're supposed to be doing in Afghanistan. Like, I don't know who we're fighting anymore. I don't know what the point is. Are we supposed to be eliminating the Taliban? Are we supposed to be setting up a democracy? Are we supposed to be changing the culture? Like, the mission creep got to such a point where there was no mission anymore. And so now it's just like this zombie war that we keep fighting, and literally nobody can identify what the fuck the mission is in Afghanistan anymore. Which, like I said, none of this is particularly surprising to anybody who's been paying attention, but to know that the government commissioned this report, compiled it, and then they sat on it. Basically, they shelved it. And the Washington Post had to go through 3 years of FOIA requests to get their hands on this so that they can publish it. And kind of the most damning part of the report is that it has conclusive proof in it that the government lied to the American people about what was going on in Afghanistan and portrayed our involvement in Afghanistan as being much more successful than it actually, honest to God, was. Much like the U.S. government did when we were in Vietnam. They lied to the American people. They also lied about Afghanistan. And like I said, this isn't surprising to anybody who pays attention, but it's there now. It's fact. It's bona fide fact. Like, you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people on record saying these things, that we have no mission in Afghanistan, that the numbers were cooked, that the American people have been lied to, that it's been sold as a much more successful campaign than it's been. No, we're not winning in Afghanistan. And quite frankly, nobody seems to know what winning in Afghanistan would even look like in the first place. And it gets worse. It gets worse because according to what is in the Afghanistan Papers, here are the numbers, allegedly, as of right now, on our war in Afghanistan. Obviously, we're on year 18. 18 years. Almost $1 trillion spent. 775,000 troops deployed. 2,300 dead. 20,589 wounded. That is staggering. When you think about it in those terms, when you look at it solely in the money and just the amount of troops, like, it's, I mean, obviously, you know, there's been a lot of troops deployed to Afghanistan, but to learn it's over 750,000 troops have been deployed to Afghanistan for fucking nothing? What the fuck? That is insane. And 2,300 of them did not come back. Over 20,000 of them are wounded. And there's no mission. There's no fucking mission. Nobody knows what we're doing. That is mind-blowing. And there's also a chart in the Washington Post story that I want to read it to you because it's so staggering to me. It states that since 2001, an estimated 157,700 people have been killed in the war in Afghanistan. Here are the numbers. Some of these are estimated because the U.S. government has been very famously reticent to post up body count numbers for obvious reasons, and I don't disagree with that. I think the whole idea, especially when they did it in Vietnam and have done it in wars past, of posting up monthly body counts, I think that's really morbid. That's gross. Like, no, I don't support that at all. So the other side of that coin is that it's hard to have an accurate body count because the U.S. government's never really given one. But here we go. Afghan security forces, 64,124. Afghan civilians, 43,074. Taliban fighters and other insurgents, 42,100. U.S. contractors, 3,814. U.S. military personnel, 2,300. NATO and coalition troops, 1,145. Humanitarian aid workers, 424. Journalists and media workers, 67. Now, what's striking to me about this chart, 43,074 Afghan civilians have been killed. 42,100 Taliban and insurgent fighters have been killed. More Afghani citizens have died during this war than Taliban and insurgent fighters. Think about that for a second. More civilians have been killed than the people that we are allegedly supposed to be fighting. And that's not to say that obviously the U.S. killed all those Afghan civilians. Obviously, I'm sure Taliban and insurgent fighters killed some of them too, but the civilian body count is higher than the enemy body count. That is staggering. Like, That blows my mind. How the fuck? How the fuck have you managed to kill more civilians than you did actual fighters? How do you even do that? But those are the numbers. And it's just, it gets worse. Because what else is detailed in this is the aid money that has been sent over the past 18 years to Afghanistan, of which it's just gobs and gobs and gobs of money. So much money that there was too much money. Like, there literally was not enough humanitarian aid projects to be funded by this money. So what do you think happens when a small country with a very shaky, wobbly, fledgling democracy all of a sudden has all this foreign aid pouring into it? Exactly what the fuck you would think happens. Corruption. Massive corruption on behalf of the Afghan government. Corruption to the point of calling it a kleptocracy. Corruption to the point where the Afghan people turned away from the democratic government and started going back to the Taliban to restore order. It's so bad, they said, you know what? We'd rather have the Taliban back. How much of a fucking failure do you have to be that you create a situation where people are like, democracy? Taliban. You know what? Taliban. Yeah, let's go with those guys. And there's also a section about how, obviously, we tried to create an Afghani army to go with our new shiny Afghani democracy. And that was a complete and utter fucking failure, too. Because, again, you had these people who... Afghanistan has never been a democracy. So you're trying to map onto a people and a culture that has no frame of reference for democracy, this our idea of democracy, and then you're trying to build this army of people who are like, no, this isn't working. And it just ended up being a total disaster. Nobody had anything nice to say about the Afghani soldiers, basically calling them in some terms that I would consider kind of racist, if we're being honest, but basically saying that these guys were just bottom of the barrel. Some of them were just either deserters or actual members of the Taliban, which I think that kind of defeated the whole purpose. And it's just a fucking disaster, a front to back fucking disaster. And now there it is in black and white. And the fact that the government's known, and we're still there, and there's still no plans to leave. Like, what the fuck? What the fuck? This is nuts. It's absolutely fucking insane. And it's staggering. And I think that Afghanistan is going to go down as Vietnam on steroids. Because at this point, I mean, Vietnam was bad. Vietnam didn't go on for 18 fucking years. Vietnam, I mean, we did kind of break Vietnam. Let's be honest. But I think it pales in comparison to what has happened in Afghanistan. We've created conditions where the Afghani people would rather be run by the Taliban. They would rather have Sharia law. They would rather have militants running them. Like, how bad do you have to be at nation building to have fucked up that bad? Like, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And the other thing that is just absolutely insane about Afghanistan now is that the opium trade has just flourished there ever since we went in. And we even managed to fuck that up. We couldn't even stop that from happening because the incentives that the U.S. and other countries gave to the Afghani poppy farmers to stop making poppy resulted in them making more poppy. Fuck. Like, you know what? Nation building is never a good idea. Obviously, we're not very good at it. I don't know why this government keeps trying to do it, but I mean, this is just staggeringly bad. This is just horrifically bad. This is, I don't know what the hell Afghanistan is going to do from here bad. But we're still there. And I guess, I don't know, are we stuck there now? can we leave? I mean, what? Nobody knows what we're doing there, but apparently we have to stay? It's just so fucked up. It's so fucked. And and what kills me about this story is, I mean, there's so much other stuff going on right now, but this kind of, like, didn't fly under the radar. There have been plenty of other people talking about it. Obviously, there's been other libertarians talking about it, but this story is not getting nearly enough buzz, and it's not getting nearly the reaction that it should be getting, which is that people should be screaming at the government to get us the fuck out of Afghanistan. If nobody can identify what the hell the mission is, we've wasted all of this money, all of this time, deployed all of these troops, and accomplished fucking nothing. In fact, made it worse. We need to go. We're done. Pack it up. Let's go. And to her credit, Tulsi, after this dropped, has proposed legislation to open up an investigation into why we are still in Afghanistan. So there's that. I mean, she's trying. I mean, bless her heart, she is anti-war. And she is still, in her capacity as a member of Congress, actually proposing legislation to look into things, which is more than I can say for certain people who are running for the Democratic nomination, who are also still members of Congress, who go on and on and on about what they'll do once they're president, and seem to forget that they're members of Congress and can do shit right now if they really wanted to. So, props to Tulsi for that. But before I leave out of this story and move on to the next one, I want to point out that stories like this are why I fight so hard for journalism as a thing that is good and should exist. Because who the hell else would have been able to do this? I mean, 3 years of fighting the U.S. government to get a hold of this. Something that honestly should have been made public when it was made, but having to go 3 years. That's a long time to develop a story. And so journalism does serve a function. And I know everybody likes to shit on the industry and on journalists and on all of the bad parts. And yes, there are bad parts and they deserve to be dragged on a regular basis in order to try to keep them from happening. But I do want to point out the flip side is that there is a lot of good that comes out of journalism. Stuff like this. That now, because Washington Post did stay the course and did take those 3 years of long, grueling time, and as far as FOIA requests are concerned, that's not fun. Doing FOIA requests is annoying, it's painstaking, it takes forever, it makes you want to pull your hair out. It takes a lot to stick with a story and to fight that uphill battle for 3 years so that stuff like this can be made public, so that people can know. So that's why I advocate for journalism as much as I do. Because for all of the bad shit, it does bring us good shit too. It does bring us stuff like this so that people can be better informed about things that, be it the government, be it private industries, be it whoever, doesn't want you to know about. So, yeah. Now, I want to move on from that story to the other kind of bombshellish story, which isn't a bombshell if you pay attention, but it is a bombshell because, well, it's confirmation of something that libertarians have long been arguing for. And that is for a sneak peek into the FISA warrant process. Now, this particular story is that the Justice Department Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, finally released his report on the investigation into the FBI's actions related to Crossfire Hurricane. Which, first of all, who is naming these things? What fuck kind of name is Crossfire Hurricane? But basically what Crossfire Hurricane was the FBI's investigation as to whether there was collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia during the 2016 campaign. How do you get Crossfire Hurricane out of that? Who is doing this naming? Can we get somebody else? But anyway, the point of this report was to investigate the FBI and to put to bed, to either confirm or dispel the long-held Trump world sort of talking point / opinion that the FBI's investigation into the 2016 collusion charges was politically motivated, that it was a quote-unquote deep state coup, basically, against Trump. And so what the report found was that there was no political bias found, that the FBI, as much as they fucked this up, they didn't do it on the basis of political grounds. It wasn't some kind of vendetta against Trump himself, which a lot of people said, hooray, look at there. They were wrong this whole time, and they've been making up this stupid, dumb talking point. That is correct. But the other thing that this report found, and that is in regards to the FISA warrants against Carter Page, which, to back this up a little bit, Carter Page, no relationship to Lisa Page, who is the other person in the Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, FBI affair thing that Trump likes to mock on a regular basis. Don't get this confused. This is Carter Page. This is not Lisa Page. So anyway, Carter Page was an aide to the Trump campaign, and there had been a FISA warrant issued basically to spy on him, to surveil his communications with various Russian officials to determine if there was any kind of collusion going on between the Trump campaign and Russia. So, what this report found was something that libertarians have long yelled about, were afraid of, and that is the FISA warrant process and how just extremely fucked it is. Now, let me back up to you and explain what a FISA warrant is. Basically, what happens is there are FISA courts, and this is all done in secret. This is not a public thing at all. In fact, this is the first time in history, this report is the first time that we're actually seeing even a portion of a FISA warrant. These things are done completely in secret, not public in any way, shape, or form because of our much vaunted threats to national security. So what ends up happening is the FBI or Justice Department or state or CIA, whoever, goes in front of the FISA court, goes in front of the judge, and puts forth an argument that this particular person is engaged in conduct so egregious that the agency in question should be allowed to violate that person's constitutional rights. That agency should be allowed to surveil that person's communications, being it tapping their phone, hacking into their emails, whatever it is, because they pose such a threat. So, here's how this is supposed to happen. You get your FISA warrant, and then they're good for 90 days. So after the 90 days, you're supposed to go back to FISA court and then either let it expire, or you have to argue and bring new information to justify extending the warrant. So the warrant on Carter Page was extended twice. So altogether, it was 3 warrants, the original one and then 2 extensions. Here's the problem. FISA. Yeah. Because these things do happen in secret, usually the warrants are allowed, and any kind of continuations that are seeked out tend to get rubber stamped. So this is a problem that libertarians have been talking about for a long time, because obviously there are some major constitutional rights being violated there. And for what it's worth, I mean, provided that they find nothing to charge you with, you may never know that you were surveilled by the U.S. government. You may never know that there was a FISA warrant against you. You may never know that they were spying on you. Yeah, massive problem. So here's the thing. On his particular warrant, and this is the original warrant, not the extensions, there was a lot of stuff missing from the original warrant application that probably would have been instructive to have in there. First one being that the Steele dossier, as I'm sure everybody remembers, the dossier that alleges that there was a P-tape, the Steele dossier was used to justify the initial warrant, which is something that has been denied for a long time. They've categorically denied that the Steele dossier was used as a basis to get the FISA warrant on Carter Page. Apparently it was, and that dossier, as it comes to find out, was paid for indirectly by the DNC as WaPo research, and it doesn't contain the best of information. Some of it's a little shoddy, some of it's downright false. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that in the original application, they forgot to mention that Carter Page was apparently a CIA agent, well, not agent, but an asset, who was communicating with Russian officials and then reporting back to the CIA. Which, think of that what you will, that one of Trump's aides on the 2016 presidential campaign was also a CIA asset. But it probably would have been very good to include that information as an explanation for why Carter Page would be talking to Russian officials. Because he's doing it at the behest of the CIA, not at the behest of Trump. Kind of important exculpatory information to add that probably would have meant that they might not have gotten the warrant. And I say might not because another problem with FISA courts, they tend to just approve anything. So, you could have got it probably without all this other bullshit, but other bullshit thrown in. And so when it came time to re-up the warrants, it was, we went from using shoddy information to point-blank lying. Yeah. It's bad. It's really, really bad. And it's kind of worse than I think most people who have had problems with the FISA system thought. Because, yeah, there's supposed to be oversight. There's supposed to be people fact-checking this stuff. And clearly, that's not happening. And this is a FISA warrant into somebody who is of some kind of importance, somewhat. So, the question is, how exactly does the FISA court do this again? How do they operate? And that's why this is kind of worse than finding out that the FBI acted this way towards Trump as some kind of personal vendetta coup thing. No, this wasn't personal at all. This is how they operate. This is what they do. This wasn't sinister. This is systemic. This is how the FBI operates. This is how the FISA courts operate. That should scare the shit out of everyone. And it also confirms what we've been trying to tell people this whole damn time, and somebody should have listened probably, a decade and a half ago, that, hey, somebody should really do something about this. Because, like I said, the FISA courts are completely in secret. There is no oversight. So, who the fuck knows? Who the fuck knows what these people are doing? Who knows what kind of crazy-ass justifications are being given to violate people's constitutional rights without them knowing? It's a total goddamn mystery because it's all secret. And so, kind of getting a little peek into the inner workings of the FBI and the FISA process here has been quite illuminating and quite frightening, as it should be, because this is something that's supposed to be a very, very serious thing, and it's not. It's so not. And it's just no, this needs to stop. The FISA courts need to go away. This is horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible. And of course, nobody's going to be made to pay anything for this. And bizarrely enough, Carter Page, oh my lord, this guy lives a blessed life because the way, there's a whole backstory as to the whole Carter Page thing. And then he didn't comply with anything, and he went on TV to go tell his story, and yada, yada, yada. It's kind of a miracle this dude isn't in jail. And it probably has something to do with being a CIA asset, if we're being honest. But yeah, just getting this tiny little peek into how the sausage is made has been frightening as fuck, as it should be. And of course, now all of a sudden, Republicans want to find Jesus on this topic because it's this system has been used against somebody that they like. And it's just like, where the fuck have you been? Where have you been? All these years that you've been approving FISA, that you've been signing off on this shit, that, I mean, even going back, if you want to go back to like the mid-2000s, Republicans said that there wasn't enough authority given to these people to illegally surveil people. There wasn't enough. And now, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, well, this is a problem. I mean, oh, Jesus, like, come on, guys. And still, they just voted to re-up the system. They just voted to give funding to the FISA. It's like all outrageous situational. I know. I've mentioned this before, but this one just kills me because it's like, you know, libertarians brought this shit up years and years and years ago, and we got looked at as a bunch of crazy tinfoil hat wearing psychos. And it's like, no, we were right. This system will be abused. There's no way that it won't be abused. But I guess now, because it's happened to Trump, all of a sudden Republicans care, I guess. I don't know. We'll see if they still care about it next week or next month or next year. But it's just, oh my God. But anyway, I like I said, I wanted to highlight those two stories because they're both confirmation of things that we know, but now it's like confirmed black and white fact that these things that we knew are indeed real. They're true. Like, we're not crazy. We've been saying this shit all along, and now all of a sudden it's like, look, confirmation, proof. We were right about Afghanistan. We were right about FISA. We were right about FBI. But of course, people still won't listen. Of course. Damn it. But at least there's a little bit of light and heat being brought to these issues, and maybe there'll be some kind of change. Maybe I'll be surprised. Maybe somebody will surprise me. Maybe Tulsi's investigation will get off the ground. Maybe there will be something done. Maybe there will be some kind of reform into the FISA system. Maybe. Hey, we can always hold out hope, but I'm not holding my breath. But on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So if you did make it this far, thank you for listening. And as always, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and my Patreon page. Take care, and until next time.